Hi everyone, this is Jed Schlackman. I'm a holistic counselor and spiritual energy healer. And in this present video, I'll be speaking about an area of holistic health which could, in a sense, apply to any issues that any of us are dealing with in terms of illness or disease or distress in our life. And this has to do with stress and regeneration and the phases of illness or disease and healing. So the process that we go through that's designed ultimately for self-healing, since our consciousness and our body are integrated, it's a mind-body system that is designed for self-healing. So when we're going through some type of illness or disease, we can shift our perspective on it to see how it's in some way an attempt by this intelligent system to create some form of healing or restoration of balance. So in covering this subject, I'll be referring to some material which comes from an introductory webinar from the Lifestyle Prescriptions University. This is a holistic healing health coaching program that you can find online at lifestyleprescriptions.org, and I don't have any affiliation with that organization, but I do encourage you to explore a little bit more about the resources they share. There are some free introductory materials that you can find there, and those can give you some ideas about going further into their educational programs. A lot of that material is based on some holistic healing concepts which connect the mind, the brain, and the organs and tissues and systems of the body, looking at the different pathways that can be mapped to understand how disease processes are playing out, and also how we can take steps to support the self-healing process to understand the different phases that are occurring in terms of stress and regeneration, so that we can help resolve whatever stresses or triggers may have occurred and assist in the recovery or regeneration process so that a person can recover their health. So I'll be going through some charts or illustrations from handouts from the Lifestyle Prescriptions University webinar. And this first one is about our autonomic nervous system. So perhaps you can see that on the screen there. Now, the autonomic nervous system, that implies something that's occurring automatically. So auto means self or automatic. The nervous system works on the principle of input and output, perception and reaction. So your autonomic nervous system involves both the sympathetic and parasympathetic aspects of functioning. So sympathetic would be what we think of as the fight or flight response, whereas the parasympathetic is the relaxation response. There's also the somatic nervous system, and that has to do with our body and having conscious control and action. So if I were to tell you to pick up a pen right now to write something down, well, you would make a conscious decision to move your arm and your hand and go pick up that pen. So that would involve the somatic nervous system to carry out that action. And then a third segment or aspect of the nervous system is the enteric nervous system, and this is the region of the gut sometimes they call it the brain in your gut. And this is where some of our gut reactions and primal feelings or emotions would appear to arise from. So all of these aspects of the nervous system are complementing one another. They don't exist separate from each other. They're each different aspects of an integrated whole. Now, if we look at our physiology, at the anatomy of the body, you'll find that there's this opposite or complementary nature to how the nervous system is controlling the different parts of the body. So the autonomic nervous system is connected with the motor side. Autonomic functions are involuntary. Involuntary means they're happening automatically without you consciously controlling them. And they work in conjunction with the somatic nervous system to allow for voluntary control and our gut brain. So if we were to look on that chart on the page that I showed you a couple minutes ago, you'll see that there's the brain, there's the cerebrum, and then there's your spinal cord. So you have the different vertebrae, the cervical, the thoracic, and lumbar, and the spinal cord goes down your back there, and it connects with the nerves going into all the different parts of your body. So you kind of have this flow chart of how energy and information are moving through the nervous system, how input and output are being carried through that system. So you have the sensory apparatus in your body that's there with perception, so you're perceiving your environment through your senses, and then that sensory information is coming into the nervous system, and then based on whatever prior experiences or pre-existing programming you have, then you react or respond to what you're perceiving. That's a useful way to think of how these functions integrate. So next we're looking at the somatic nervous system. So we'll look at the lifestyle prescriptions handout from their webinar on that. So you'll see here we have the afferent and efferent. The somatic nervous system or voluntary nervous system associated with the voluntary control of body movements via skeletal muscles. And this consists of both afferent or sensory nerves and efferent or motoric nerves. So you have the incoming information and then the outgoing information. So afferent refers to receiving, so you're receiving input or information with the afferent nerve, and then with the efferent nerve you're acting, you're sending out that impulse to carry out some type of action. The guts, brain, or enteric nervous system is located in the sheaths of tissue that are lining the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, and colon. So you have this neural network that exists in your digestive system. So that's a very important part of our nervous system and how it's functioning. In the area or the field of mental health, there's been a lot of research and discussion in recent years about this gut-brain connection. And in a sense, your gut has its own secondary brain that's deeply connected to your main brain at the top of the nervous system where your head is. So they're in constant communication and connection with one another. And they're working together in a sense to react or respond to whatever your senses are perceiving. So we'll go into how the somatic nervous system operates a little bit more now. When we have a sympathetic response, and that's what you might think of as a stress response, where we need to be alert and active to act or react, stress induces a fight or flight or freeze type of response. So this form or aspect of functioning, the sympathetic response, is usually the dominant mode of our nervous system. It's what we're doing more often than not, in a sense, during our waking hours of the day. So activity, work, stress, fight or flight response, this focuses on working organs like the heart, the muscles, the brain. So we need to use our heart and our lungs and our muscles to use energy to carry out actions in our life. And we also need to use the brain to be thinking and analyzing and making choices or decisions about what we're doing. So a lot of energy is directed to those organs, and they're usually more active between the hours of the day of 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And of course there's some individual variation there. Not everyone follows the same daily cycle or routine or rhythm. So some people might get up a little bit earlier and start doing things, let's say at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. Other people might get up a little bit earlier and not really be active until maybe 8 or 9 a.m. And the same thing with the evening. Some people might kind of go in earlier than 8 p.m. They might start to rest around 7. Others might be staying up and active till 11 p.m. or midnight. So when we're in this sympathetic response, there's a checklist here of what are some of the symptoms or things you might observe. And you have stressed or tense body, you have obsessive, conflictive thinking, sleeplessness, absence of appetite, loss of weight, cold body and extremities, high blood pressure, and nervous with cold perspiration. Now these would all tend to be symptoms related to anxiety or tension, because you're using this sympathetic response and it's kind of heightened or kind of overactive in a sense. So it's being applied or sustained to a point where it's putting stress on your body, and you have these physiological symptoms of stress or anxiety that are appearing. Next, we're going to look at the other side of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic response. And with this, we're actually going into a regeneration phase. So here, people could eat and sleep and recuperate. So the parasympathetic response serves metabolism, regeneration, and buildup of resources. And the organs that are most involved with this would include all the digestive organs, such as the stomach, the bowel, the colon, that is, the liver. And the activity of these organs and of this parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous functioning are mainly between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. And of course, again, that varies somewhat from one individual to another. But in general, it would be the overnight hours, the time when you're starting to rest and when you're sleeping. So keep in mind that when you're asleep, your digestive system and your elimination system are actually quite active. Your body is breaking down and absorbing things from your food, and you're also starting to eliminate toxins and waste from your body. The liver is very active during those overnight hours, both for digestion and detoxification. Now, in this parasympathetic response is the dominant mode of your autonomic nervous system. Here are some of the symptoms or signs you would observe. There could be fatigue and tiredness, warm body and extremities. There might be fever or inflammation. You could be mentally fuzzy and not thinking so clearly. There may be weight gain and strong appetite. The digestive organs will be getting more blood or a lot of blood. There could be a lot of perspiration, hot skin and body, and there might be low blood pressure and a slower heart rate. So those are some of the signs or visible symptoms you might perceive when there's intense parasympathetic response or activity. Now, with the Lifestyle Prescriptions University, on their handout, they have some information about some technology they use in their assessment process to look at the level of activity in different areas of the body. They use something called a thermobuzzer, which is a form of thermal imaging or thermography. And with that, you can see what areas of the body are hot or cold, where there's inflammation or not. So that could give you some indicator of how the different aspects of this system are functioning, of where in the body you'll find some stress response or some regeneration response occurring. Now we're looking next to beyond the autonomic nervous system and 5 points or phases. So we'll see here on this handout where it has this flow chart of these 5 points or phases in this process. So in this mapping of this stress response, point 1, or the first part of these phases, is what's called the stress trigger. So a stress trigger could really be anything that occurs in our life that sort of upsets us or throws us off balance in a sense, that disrupts our normal flow of life or functioning. So that trigger activates this stress response or stress phase. And then if that stress phase comes to a conclusion, if we get past that phase, then we come to the third point, or the regeneration trigger. So the regeneration trigger could be anything that we experience or that occurs that seems to in some way resolve whatever the stress was. So let's say that your stress trigger was that you lost your job. So now you're in this stressful state, you're worried about your financial situation, you're worried about your source of income, and you're anxious and your mind is very active, and you're taking steps to find a new job or to deal with that challenge. So let's say it gets to the point where you find a new job. So now you found this new job and you're feeling confident that the situation now is resolved, that you'll have a steady source of income, you'll be gainfully employed and occupied in an activity that brings some sense of stability back into your life. So that circumstance has created a resolution, and now you're no longer feeling stressed about that. So you're psychologically and physiologically now going into the regeneration phase as a result of that regeneration trigger of getting the job. So if everything goes well and smoothly with this regeneration phase, if that's not disrupted or diverted, then you come back to a point of health, a point of balance or equilibrium. And so you've completed your healing process. So this is how things often do unfold in our lives. We have some type of stress trigger, we go into the stress phase where we're in that sympathetic nervous system excess activity, and then we get to a point where we're no longer in that stress phase, where something has allowed that to be settled. We're no longer anxious or concerned about whatever it was that we've been disturbed by. And so once that cue occurs, then the body has the message and the programming now to start to regenerate. So you're expending a lot of energy during the stress phase, during that sympathetic nervous system activity, the fight or flight, that adrenal overactivity. Sometimes people experience what's called adrenal exhaustion because you have all those stress hormones being generated, which takes a lot of energy. It depletes your nutrients and so on. So once you're able to get past that stress phase and regenerate, now your body wants to rest and rebuild. So you might be hungry because your body now can take in more nutrients and absorb things from the food you consume. And so you're eating more, you're resting more, your body's rebuilding and regenerating. So that's a way to kind of put this all together to conceive of what's occurring in these different phases. Now in the Lifestyle Prescriptions University Health Coaching Program, they speak a lot about the root causes of illness or disease. And these could include things in one's lifestyle, it could include social factors, emotions and beliefs, different stress triggers, whether they're internal or external things from the environment, and things that are happening with your organ tissues and their connection or relay to the brain. So that is an overview of some of the ways that they're looking at what causes or triggers stress and how you might start to work on a therapeutic level to bring about or support the healing process. So an important aspect of that is actually our awareness. It's very helpful to have an awareness of these different phases of what's actually going on in our consciousness and in our body. So if we understand that we're in the sympathetic stress, fight or flight type of activity mode, then we'll understand what our body is trying to do to help us go through that, to help us react and respond to whatever challenges we're facing in our life. So in that state, we're expending a lot of energy in order to deal with whatever the stress or challenge is. And if that goes on for too long, eventually we will get kind of depleted. Our system may appear to crash in some way, and we'll be pushed into a regeneration phase where we need to rest and recover and rebuild. Now, if you're in the regeneration phase, you might have certain types of symptoms which are labeled as symptoms of disease or illness, but those are actually signs that your body is now taking steps to kind of aggressively rebuild and recover itself. So even though they might appear as symptoms of illness, they're actually a necessary part of that regeneration process, and you can take steps to support your body's regeneration so that those symptoms are not as extreme as they might otherwise be, so you can regenerate in a sense more smoothly and gracefully. And if you understand what's occurring, you'll be conscious to not do things that would interfere with or disrupt the regeneration process. So often in our modern society, we don't have an awareness or understanding of what's happening, and we take steps that interfere with the healing process. We may take certain types of medicines or drugs that suppress symptoms, but by suppressing those symptoms, we're actually suppressing our innate healing process and prolonging our suffering or prolonging the period of illness. We may even make some illness that may have recovered, in other words, that may have gone away naturally due to the process completing itself, end up becoming a chronic illness because we didn't allow that healing and regeneration to complete. So we want to have the awareness of these phases of the stress trigger, of what's going on with the stress phase with our autonomic nervous system, and the sympathetic response, sympathetic symptoms, and then the point where the regeneration begins, where there's some type of regeneration trigger, where we've either internally or externally found a resolution to the original stress. So sometimes we're able to do something in the external world that seems to solve the challenge or crisis that had appeared. And sometimes it's more of an internal resolution or shift, where we change our thought or belief or perception about a particular issue or situation so that we no longer feel stressed or disturbed by it. So different psychological healing modalities can assist with that. Things like meditation and hypnosis, emotional freedom technique, neurolinguistic programming, and some other modalities are often used to foster that resolution, that conclusion of the stress phase, so that the regeneration phase can be entered. So we can break this down even further now, looking at the major points and phases in this healing process. So at the beginning, you're in your normal flow of life in a state of health. And then some type of stress trigger occurs. So you can call that a trauma. There could be some automatic or conditioned reflex or reaction to respond to that stress or trauma. So whatever coping mechanism the body and mind have available to deal with that stress gets activated or initiated. Then you have the stress phase. So this is where your whole system is kind of stress active. The sympathetic nervous system is in its dominant phase. So you're in this state of anxiety or conflict over whatever stress you're dealing with. Then you come up to regeneration. So there's some real life solution or some internal within your consciousness type of solution. So that brings us into the regeneration phase, which is a stress passive and parasympathetic dominant phase. Then there could be some type of a healing peak where there's a short stress or sympathetic activity occurring. And then there's auto-regulation or normalization of functions. So you're coming back into your typical normal homeostasis or balance in terms of how your body and mind are functioning. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic are now coming into kind of a balance or equilibrium where you're active and using your energy during the day and accomplishing things and doing work. And then at night you're able to relax, you're able to get a good night's rest and sleep. You wake up refreshed the next day and repeat that cycle. So that would be the goal where you want to get to in your healing process. So that would be the state of health where you have normal day activity and night relaxation. So this gives us some insight into this process of stress and regeneration. Sometimes we go through those phases rather quickly, and this could be where you have more of an acute type illness. So let's say you have a stressful week, or let's say you were partying too hard, you didn't get enough sleep, you overloaded your body with food or alcohol or something, so your body was in this kind of acute stress, and as a result of that you ended up having to rest and relax, and now your body went into some type of an illness like a cold or flu, and so with that your body might be inflamed, you might have a fever, you're perspiring and sweating, so you have all those types of symptoms. You're also able to clear out toxins, so your body is releasing a lot of toxins during that phase, and now you're ready to regenerate, to rebuild and reclaim your energy. So that might happen rather quickly, and the original stress got resolved when you realize you can't be partying every night, you have to rest and recover. So the stress wasn't continuing, it was just kind of a brief acute stress, something that was a temporary situation, not an ongoing stress or challenge. You weren't continuing to deal with a stressful situation or continuing to worry about something going on in your external reality or environment. So that's why things were able to go through the phases more quickly, and you're able to recover and get back to your normal flow or routine in your life. However, there are often situations in our life that don't resolve so quickly or easily. Sometimes things actually get stuck in our subconscious, so we have some type of trauma that doesn't get resolved at all. We just sort of suppress it in our consciousness, and it's unconsciously influencing and affecting us, and either creating a chronic illness or leading up to some serious illness in the future. So often things like cancers and other diseases people experience are actually a result of some unresolved stress that leads up to these different phases playing out, where there may be some type of resolution that occurs, and then the body goes through sort of an intense or aggressive healing process or rebuilding process where you have some major symptoms present, where you see those symptoms as a major disease, but they're actually part of a regeneration phase of this process of self-healing. So that's why awareness is often really vital, so that you can understand what's happening and you could support the healing process rather than interfering with it and causing it to spiral into perhaps a life-threatening situation. I hope that this discussion has been useful or beneficial for those that are viewing it. If you're interested in understanding more about this process of stresses and regeneration and the healing process, looking at these phases, you can look up more information from the Lifestyle Prescriptions University, and there are other healing modalities or healing education organizations that explore some similar ideas and models. Much of that model is actually based upon the discoveries or findings of German New Medicine. A man named Dr. Hamer initially uncovered some of these connections between how the body, mind, and organs interact with each other, initially looking at cancer. So he developed a model of understanding cancer and how it relates to the self-healing process that occurs with a stress trigger. So other practitioners and students of his and his students have built upon that original model, have explored different methods of applying healing interventions to support successfully navigating those different phases. So if you see things like biogenealogy, biodecoding, metamedicine, and a couple other modalities or holistic healing education systems, you'll gain some additional insight into that. I appreciate each of you for taking your time to explore these subjects, for pursuing your own healing. And if you're interested in holistic health and spirituality, you're welcome to visit my website, which is phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. I would like now to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.